Welcome back to another episode of the Max Stern Podcast. Kyle Stitcher alongside James Finch. And today we are talking about one of our favorite things, trades. Using kind of Frank Seravalli's trade targets to just who's available. We'll integrate a little bit of our contract projections where it makes sense. But this is kind of a sense of who he's hearing is available in the marketplace. This does not mean that they will or will not get traded. It's not necessarily us reporting anything. We're not going to, or anything we're talking here is based on what he's reporting. So no, I don't think any inside information or anything will be thrown out, but logical destinations, logical pairs. That's kind of our MO here. So appreciate you listening. Max Stern Podcast available on all major podcast platforms. And our contract projections that we're probably going to reference at times in this episode, available pinned post on X at AFP Analytics. We're also on Blue Sky, same handle, and Thread, same handle. Do we have can you pin a post on Blue Sky?
Yeah.
So contract projections are also pinned there, I would imagine. I haven't double checked. Okay.
They're on Blue Sky. They're pinned on Threads. But again, X is where we primarily are. We pay attention to Blue Sky and try and post there, and then Threads is kind of rung or two lower on the ladder.
Threads gets the cross post because we have things set up to do that.
Yeah,
and that's about it.
Yep.
But if you're looking to engage or anything, X first, Blue Sky second. And that's pretty much where we will engage back. Blue Sky, you'll probably get a response on as quick. X, pretty immediately. Threads, good luck. So, anyways, trade targets, trade boards, contract projections, integrate a little bit. So one thing that here I'm gonna bang the drum that I've been banging for 3 months now. The rental defensive market, with Marcus Pettersson going to Vancouver, Cody Ceci, I know that sounds insane, going to Dallas. The rental defensive market is thin. That does not mean there might not be. We are going to talk about some defensemen, but I don't necessarily see anyone that stands out that doesn't have a little bit of term on their contract. On Frank's board, at least.
Yeah, so, I mean, there are some on there, but it's not like the greatest list of names. Some of the ones higher up on his list are ones with term.
Exactly.
Which I think also kind of plays into what I just said of the ones who are pending UFAs are not the greatest list of names.
So there are some decent pending UFAs, but a lot of them are on teams that are not going to be sending them out.
Well, I also think it depends your definition of decent.
I mean that, yeah.
Plus the whatever role you would be needing them in matters.
Yeah. Like our top projected player is Jacob Chikrin on Washington. He's not getting traded. It's not happening. And then Aaron Ekblad and Neil Pionk are the other two right up there.
Not happening.
Those are the top 3 teams in the league. They're not moving those guys. And now with Pettersson,
Gavrikov is jumping out to me. He's not going anywhere.
No.
It's not a great market, and as we've covered recently, and we can say it again right now, Trouba, Borgen, Ceci already moved. Those teams might be kind of smart for getting ahead of everyone else.
Well, Trouba went to a non-contender, which is
right, but as far as actually making the move, so you have choices and not kind of getting stuck with what's left over, and also prices potentially rising, supply and demand.
Cam Fowler was also traded.
Yes. St. Louis.
St. Louis, not a contender as well. Let's actually start here. So what Frank does is he puts guys who have been traded kind of off the board. could you see a scenario where one of those 2, 3, so he's got, let's see, Jacob Trouba, Cam Fowler, and Alex Carrier as off the board as traded. I was just kind of looking quickly. I mean, Cody Cece's not going to get traded again. Like, Dallas got him for a reason. Vancouver just upped Marcus Pettersson recently, so he's not going to get flipped again. But could you see one of Trouba, Fowler, or Carrier getting traded again?
I could see Trouba or Carrier.
Yeah.
I don't think Fowler moves again. Trouba would be interesting because he had his no move. It was kind of tough to trade him in the first place from New York. Is he willing to go somewhere else again mid-season? That's a question I do not have the answer to. But I think if he was made available, he would instantly be at the top of lists for a lot of contenders. And then Carrier would be at the top of the list for a lot of contenders as far as rentals.
Does he have term?
No.
I
Actually,
thought we did
he
a
might
projection.
now.
I think he's a 3-year contract.
I think last year was when he signed his deal.
I think him and Fabro, I always get them mixed up. Fabro's the pending UFA.
Yes.
And Carrier.
So he does have term,
yeah.
actually.
Yep. So Carrier's term, so probably not.
I lean towards no because I believe he's been playing with Hudson.
He's been good and
doing pretty well.
I think Montreal got him for a reason. So,
and they're even they're not completely out of it.
No.
They've been doing better lately. Maybe, if anything, maybe they try and add someone or maybe not even add, but maybe they decide it's not worth moving a Savard and they try and make a push. So I don't know if Carrier really goes. I guess to answer your question, I don't see any of those three moving.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really more of a question of does someone else look at Trouba and is he willing to go someplace else? Yeah, I think that's really the question. But should we stick with the defenseman on the board?
I want to ask one more name, and you can say no if it's crazy. David Jiricek.
No, I think Minnesota gave up too much.
Okay.
I guess never say never, but I think they would really need to get a premium asset in return that's going to help them right now. And that probably needs to be like a solidified top 6 scoring forward.
I agree.
So
the only reason I bring it up, so that requirement of a return would be tough. Not many teams are making that happen. Faber, Spurgeon, Bogosian, you're probably fine on the right side going into the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I had questions about why the Wild thought that was a good idea to, like, why they needed to make that trade in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, it's great to have the young right shot defenseman, good asset to have. I just wonder if that could be used in a trade to maybe get a center.
Then
because you'd still be strong on the right side.
The other issue the Wild will have is going to be salary as well.
Yeah, so you need to move other players if you're adding anyone with really any salary.
Yeah.
But he could, in theory, be a main piece in a trade package.
Yeah, I just don't see a fit, and I think I don't see there's no name popping out to me that would make enough sense for Minnesota to be able to do it, especially considering what Minnesota gave up and the salary constraints that are going to be on them making that move. And you're right. They can send someone else out to clear space, but then that's another thing that they have to kind of worry about. And I don't know. there's no name that's sticking out on their roster that's like you need to move.
The obvious, yeah.
There's no obvious contract to move.
It might be more of an off-season thing.
Yeah.
But I guess I'll just leave it at there's a couple teams who could have, in theory, top 6 centers available who are specifically in need of a right shot defenseman.
Yep.
So, again, it might be more of an off-season thing, but Minnesota could match up very well for some other teams.
Yep. Should we stick with defense? We might as well stick with defensemen at this point with names on the board since we're there, and then we'll get to the forwards. So, one that I thought could have. So, when the Flames Flyers trade was starting to be rumored, the name that I thought was going to Calgary was potentially Rasmus Ristolainen. He obviously was not the name because it was Farabee and Frost, but that would have made sense potentially for Calgary. Like, I think it was known as Kuzmenko and Jacob Peltier going to Philadelphia. I thought value-wise that made sense for Ristolainen. Like, I'll say Kuzmenko a middle 6-ish. I mean, you can view him a lot of ways. You can view him a lot of ways.
He could be a first-line winger if he is at the top of his game, but he might also be like a third-line winger who isn't playing well.
Which is kind of okay. Rasmus Ristolainen's not top pair defenseman, but like
I think we saw it happen with Buffalo when he was bad. He's actually pretty, not like really good now, but he's a solid right shot defenseman now.
correct. Yes.
I would have said, Philly, what are you doing if he was traded for Kuzmenko? Like, if that was the package back for Ristolainen, I would have said that. I wouldn't do that as Philly.
So you would be shooting for a little bit higher. I mean, I think okay, if Kuzmenko,
you should be getting. I think Philly should be getting a first round pick for Ristolainen, and
so it's someone who's kind of like Kuzmenko except consistent.
yes,
realistic.
And part of the problem with Kuzmenko is he's a pending unrestricted
yes,
free agent.
Yeah.
So adding that in there, like you're getting him for potentially 2 months.
Yeah.
So giving up a right shot defenseman, probably second pair with multiple years on his contract still at $5.1 million, that's going to be pretty good value.
Highlighting the fact that the right shot market is going to be thin. He's someone that would make a lot of sense for a team to go and get, especially with the salary, where the salary cap's going to be next season. Most contenders, if they can fit him now, should really be considering this, because it's absolutely fine to have him for next season too.
Yeah,
no concern.
Isn't it kind of crazy that this is what we're saying about Rasmus Ristolainen? Just thinking back,
to an extent.
I just, if we go back 3-4 years ago and how he was viewed in Buffalo, and I mean, I guess Buffalo got a decent haul for him in a trade, so it's not like he league-wide was viewed as a bad player. So I think a lot of what Buffalo fans probably saw was just a player who played for the Buffalo Sabres, had numbers like he played for the Buffalo Sabres.
He was put in a role that he was not suited for. Like, he was
on a bad team.
On a bad team. That's the reality. Like, I'm not going to say that I knew that he was not great when he was in Buffalo. I knew that. I could watch the games. I could look at the numbers. I understood that there were issues. But he also like there's enough there to like about him that maybe not making him play 30 minutes a night against the other team's clear best players and play in all situations maybe can be a little bit salvageable there. Like there's
Yes.
obviously skill sets there that can translate.
For a while, I think a lot of people were kind of saying, okay, this guy's off of Buffalo. Could be a little better than we think he is. And not just Ristolainen,
Yeah.
any player. So, yeah, I mean, I think if he's made available by Philly, he is probably the top defensive target this year at the deadline, barring like a bigger name.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, next name we'll get to maybe. Maybe.
Potentially, yeah, okay. Well,
But yeah, but right there, and I think as far as like bigger physical like style, more quote unquote stay like
right shot.
right shot, yeah, he's probably going to be about the best they can do. Any team's going to do. Ironically, he has no playoff experience.
Yeah.
He has never been in the playoffs. Maybe this will be his year.
I also want to kind of point out there's a lot of talk about John Tortorella and whether he's good for certain players or not. It has been mentioned that he's been good for Ristolainen for what it's worth. And I'm not saying that as a props or look at this great coach. I'm more just saying Tortorella is a very specific type of coach, and that may have helped Ristolainen rebound from the situation in Buffalo.
Yeah. So the other, I think, I don't know if this is a player that's moved before the deadline. Probably more of an off-season one. But I think that
Depends.
he could qualify as a bigger name than Ristolainen, and that's Bo Byram, Buffalo Sabres. Kind of ironic we're going from Ristolainen to Byram. Pending RFA, we have him getting a pretty nice payday, which could go up even more if he closes out the season strongly. As
So, yeah, it's one. I don't know how much higher it goes. I could see it coming down.
could could
Like this is one where I would almost wonder if it comes down slightly. That's my personal.
I mean, and it's kind of ironic because originally I had him lower, and then you argued to
Yeah,
bump him up. We right now we're projecting around 7 years, around $7 million. Was it 7 years by seven or 6 by 7?
long term 7 by 7.25.
Now that the with the higher
Which,
cap,
yes,
yeah,
that's a number based off of a
90.
cap of 95 and a half.
Yeah,
Which, really quick, we think that's what it's going to be. Most of the media members are saying that's what it is. There was a memo released saying that's what it's expected to be. There's still a couple people with some influence and people that generally would know this stuff that are saying it could be higher still, but most people are saying that's the set in stone number.
yeah. So anyway, so Byram long term we have a 7 year 7.5 deal, 7.25 deal, and then short term where did we end up about
5.25.
so in line for a little bit of a payday, probably regardless.
Yeah. He's playing pretty much top pair minutes. So he's going to get paid to some extent. It's a question of one, well, not even one. It's just a question of how do teams view him? Do they actually view him as that top pair defenseman? Is he going to get paid like it? Do they want to make a long term commitment? Are they hesitant for any reason? Yeah.
Yeah, most of his points this season have come at 5-on-5 because he's not getting a lot of power play minutes
Right.
behind Rasmus Dahlin and Owen Power in Buffalo. So, yeah, he's probably one of the more desirable assets the Sabres have if they're looking to make a hockey trade.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of connection with Elias Pettersson before Vancouver had done the JT Miller trade. Pettersson may be still available, maybe not, but seems a lot less likely that Vancouver is going to do it before the trade deadline, at least at this point. So Byram would have made sense packaging in that trade. He still makes sense potentially for a hockey trade, but I think the Sabres would be looking for a clear top six scoring forward, ideally probably at center. And I understand they might have to add a little bit more, but I think the Sabres might have to add a little bit more.
Yeah, maybe.
But that's kind of the return that they would be looking for. So I don't know how many teams are going to be willing to do that before the trade deadline.
Probably not many. I kind of speculated if that's something that would interest Dallas with Heiskanen out. But even then, I don't know if that's a move they really pull the trigger on. So it seems like that's kind of one of those names more likely to be in the off season, but it's certainly not. He's not off the table right now.
Buffalo's probably asking Dallas, I would imagine, for Stankoven.
Yeah, it's going to be one of the young forwards. I'm sure, honestly, they probably go to the table saying Wyatt Johnston, but that's getting laughed at.
That's not. Yeah,
They
I mean, they might be asking it, but
that's probably where they start, knowing it's going to work back to the middle more, but that's what teams do.
let's put it this way: it's probably not getting done for less than Stankoven.
Right.
If Dallas is truly interested.
Which they very well might not be. It's just one of the more, okay, Heiskanen's hurt, maybe.
Yeah. They do have a little bit of a longer term need for a potentially younger defenseman too. A little bit.
They don't really need it. They would have a very strong top four.
Yeah.
Heiskanen, Harley, Lindell, Byram, also very left-handed.
Yeah. And then they have Liam Bichel in the wings as well.
Also left-handed.
So maybe
that matters
maybe
to them.
Yeah, we'll see. I know Byram has said he does like playing on the right side for what that's worth.
And Heiskanen likes to do it too. So
yeah. I don't expect that to happen. I agree with you.
Neither do I.
If Dallas is trying to push some chips in, could make sense, but
asset-wise, the teams could match up. That's
correct.
pretty much what's being connected here. It's not much more than that.
So maybe the top rental free agent defenseman, maybe. And Frank's got him pretty high on this board. I don't know if he actually gets traded. That's Ryan Lindgren, Washington Capital, or not Washington, New York Rangers. Yeah. His brother's with the Capitals.
Yep.
Who also could be, I don't know, traded at some point. Probably not at the deadline. Just trying to save myself here. So Ryan Lindgren, defenseman, Rangers. I guess the thing with the Rangers is you just have no clue what they're thinking.
Yeah. I mean, Lindgren hasn't been good.
No.
Will be a UFA. His name's been out there. That's why he's high on this list. I guess. Like, he could move. He could not move. I feel like the Rangers would be looking to also bring someone in. And while it doesn't necessarily have to be the same trade, but if it isn't, then you're also kind of like, now you need two things to line up for this to be good. So I don't know. I don't know if I say it's likely or unlikely. It's just kind of a flip a coin. It could make sense to do it, but could also not make sense.
To me, he's one of the use him as your own rental type players. I don't always love that phrase, but like as you said, like if they move him, they're going to be looking for a very similar type of blue liner back. And as I've said many times, that market's thin.
Yeah. I mean, it was also things were not going well in New York. Okay, you've traded away Kako. You traded away Truba. Now you made the deal for Miller. Maybe see how it goes a little bit, then decide on Lindgren. If you still feel like you need more of a shakeup, then maybe it is more likely at that point. But I would assume it's a let's see how Miller changes things for us and
Yeah.
go from there.
JT Miller, that would be.
Yes.
Not Keandre on the back end.
Right.
Next defenseman on the list, Seth Jones, Chicago Blackhawks.
This is an interesting one. Right away, 5 more seasons, $9.5 million per. Money, I would assume, gets retained if he is on the move, unless they're taking back a deal that helps out a team. In the right role, I think Seth Jones could be useful.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want him to be your top pair guy. You definitely don't want him to be like the defenseman on your team. I don't think this is exactly the same, but perception wise, similar to Darnell Nurse. As far as here's a defenseman who is making too much money.
Yeah.
So again, I don't think that's very attractable to teams. So for this to happen, it's going to have salary retained or a bad contract coming back to Chicago.
So your Dallas Stars suggestion, I think there's been dots connected because he was also born in the Dallas, like he's from Texas. But talking about right shot, talking about defensemen, talking about a team that has the room right now and would in the future as well. And then he wouldn't be the top guy there by any means. He would be the top paid.
He's probably second pair.
Correct.
Well, when everyone's healthy, second pair.
Yeah.
Maybe that works. Maybe they're able to kind of ship out a Dumba or Labushkin. They have some space to work with right now with some guys on LTIR. I don't know. Maybe it works. And if Chicago retains a little bit as well, like that's.
Yeah.
There's other players on Chicago too that could be had. I don't want to kind of jump too far ahead to other possible names on the list, but that could be a trade that's a little bigger where they might be able to get like a decent forward too.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a matchup I like.
Another defenseman, so this is kind of the last shot Rasmus Ristolainen and Jamie Oleksiak. I think a lot of teams would like to have him. I wonder if Dallas would like him back again, a left shot issue, but Dallas could make sense with him returning.
He's kind of that playoff type guy that teams want. He's a very big defenseman.
So if it's kind of funny, the Rangers have already acquired one Kraken defender, but if they wanted to move out Lindgren and shake it up a little bit, Oleksiak would make a lot of sense to bring in on their blue line.
I agree. The only thing I wonder is if, and this I have no idea, but he's got another season at $4.6 million. Do the Rangers do that? Are they okay with that? Or would they prefer kind of the Lindgren money to fall off and be able to spend that in free agency or elsewhere? Do they want kind of that second, third line defenseman eating up 4.6? It would, though, if they just kind of want to switch things up still. Lindgren out, Oleksiak in. That's still sort of the same type of player. So yeah, that could make sense.
Another team we haven't talked about for both Ristolainen and Oleksiak that could make a lot of sense. Ottawa. They could use a slightly bigger, more physical defenseman who's not named Travis Hamonic.
Yeah.
On their blue line. I know they got Shabbat, they got Sanderson, they have I'm blanking on Nick Jensen, who they got in the Chikrin trade.
Jensen's actually been a really good fit
Yeah,
next to
yeah.
Shabbat.
So maybe round it out with Alexiak or Ristolainen in your top four or something. I don't know. Just kind of spitballing, but just style wise, he would be different than a lot of what they both Alexiak and Ristolainen would be a lot different than Ottawa's kind of current style of at least their quality defensemen.
Yeah.
Another name that has been out there, another kind of like, well, a lot of teams could be interested. I think he's been talked about almost every single trade deadline for like the past 3 years. Connor Murphy, Chicago Blackhawks, solid, just a solid player.
When he's healthy, which right now he is.
Correct. It, and Frank's right up on Murphy, compares him to Jake McCabe, or at least the contract to Jake McCabe. Like,
Yeah.
not the same. Like, McCabe's a more physical presence, but both are just kind of steady, like not like more modern stay at home type defenseman. Right shot, so that's going to be attractive to a lot of teams. Again, teams that we've mentioned could make sense.
Pretty much anyone that needs a right shot defenseman, this could be the player. You can probably get Chicago to retain and lower that AAV, and it's just way more manageable than a lot of bigger names, or even specifically to Chicago. We just talked about Seth Jones. A Connor Murphy move is just way easier to make happen. You're probably getting a fairly similar player at this point, so, or level of player, I should say. That could be a really solid move for a contender. Dallas would make a lot of sense. I almost wonder if the conversation would really be about Murphy and not Jones. Really, any contender, I'd wonder. Well, no, I don't. This it gets hard financially. We're still kind of in that world this year of a lot of teams are tight, but I'd wonder if that's like an Edmonton type guy to have more depth defensively.
I have a similar type of team that I was going to throw out. Florida Panthers. I wonder if they
Yeah,
could make that work, because they have a need there,
yeah,
especially a right shot guy. Find a middleman team, so Chicago retains half down to 2.2. Find another team to retain another half down to 1.1. It's pretty, that they
yeah,
should be able to fit that. He would be a steady player for them for this year and next year.
yeah. That would be a really good fit.
Maybe they try and go bigger name hunting, but Murphy's cap hit, Alexiak's cap hit as well, are a little bit more reasonable.
They're very manageable too. If you can get some salary or retention, it's way easier to make happen. Another team, if they're looking to add Vancouver, they need a right shot
Yeah,
defenseman.
yeah. Ironic. After even getting I know Pedersen's last shot, but yeah, they absolutely could add
Oh yeah.
another defenseman. So probably one of the other, I guess, two, one, then maybe a second more attractive rental options. And again, this is a relative term here.
Yeah.
We'll start with Brian Dumoulin, veteran.
Veteran with playoff and cup experience.
Exactly. Bottom four at this point.
For sure, I would even say bottom pair. But I would assume someone acquires him at the deadline. 3.15 million just for this season, then he's a free agent. That could get retained, and a lot of teams can pretty easily make that fit. So yeah, I guess if you need someone at the top of your lineup, I don't know if that's the player I'd go for. But if you just need some more depth, or like a solidified the bottom pair, good defenseman to acquire.
Edmonton I would love that. I would love that idea for them.
Yeah.
Ottawa can use him as their veteran presence instead of Travis Hamonic. That would probably be a net positive for them. Just kind of picking on that situation right now.
Right.
But
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I one team I wonder about, and it gets tough again money wise, but Tampa Bay needs defensemen.
Tampa Bay needs decent depth players
Right.
anywhere. But
Yeah.
But yes, a Dumoulin would make sense because they can get his salary down relatively
Right.
speaking.
After Dumoulin, one that feels maybe a little more up in the air whether or not he gets moved. Another pending UFA, but Provorov for the Blue Jackets. Pending UFA, 6.75 million AAV is what Frank has listed.
Yeah, because there's some money retained there by like LA, I think.
Well, what I'm trying to remember off the top of my head is that actually lower already.
No, I think that
Yeah, it's at
yeah, it is. Yeah,
4.725 right now.
yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So can retain that in half one more time.
Yeah.
Which I guess gets you down to a pretty manageable spot, about 2.3, 2.35, well, 7.5. Not quite. Either way, manageable. So I don't know. I guess that would be one where that could actually be a really solid pickup for a team. Honestly, Florida, it's not
Yeah.
a right shot, but even then,
Yeah.
Florida makes sense. I think the biggest question is just whether or not he's actually made available.
Yeah. One team for a defenseman that we've kind of not talked about that I just kind of want to throw out here randomly. I don't know what direction they go, but Utah. I don't.
I think if anything, they're selling defensemen.
Okay.
They have a lot of defensemen.
Yeah.
They're not at the same spot as the Kings, but depth wise, defensively, they have a lot of names. So I don't know if Utah would do that. I think maybe one of the defensemen we're talking about that have term, maybe they're interested, but for some of the rentals, I don't.
That's
I don't
that
see
they
it.
because they had issues earlier, so they went and acquired a bunch, and now they have a surplus. But they could be actually one sending guys out. Like they could do something in tandem where bring in someone with a couple years,
Yes.
while sending out an Ian Cole or an Ole Mata or something like
Right.
that.
So that's kind of what I'm getting at. Is
Yeah.
I like a Connor Murphy matchup. I don't know about him specifically because they honestly don't really need right shots. But in general, the guys with term might make more sense for them if they're adding a defenseman. After Provorov,
One of the better right shot rentals.
yeah, which again, better. Uh, better might not be the word to hang on to there. It's technically correct, but David Savard, you're looking at getting a bottom pair right shot defenseman.
With playoff experience.
Right. Which teams will be interested.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not trying to say they won't be, but keep in mind he's a bottom pair defenseman, ideally.
Yeah.
3.5 million. Another one again. We're gonna probably keep hammering home retention, but that's going to matter this year for sure. But he's a free agent at the end of the year, so it's a rental. Pretty much all the teams we've mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting name defensively on this list, Zach Jones from the Rangers. What's really interesting about that is he's 24. He's a pending RFA, so there's team control there. There could be a lot more teams interested than contenders. So I don't know. That's one I guess it could happen right now. I don't know if it really needs to happen right now.
It's probably like if the Rangers can make a hockey trade to improve, probably up front.
Right.
Sure, I he hasn't really gotten an opportunity with the Rangers, and especially
Yeah.
now you have Borgen in Schneider and like Schneider's there, Adam Fox,
Jones is
Keandre Miller.
for right now a bottom pair guy.
Yeah,
Unless maybe like Lindgren is
yeah,
moved, I
exactly.
guess he could bump up.
Yeah,
But yeah, I guess I for sure agree if there's a bigger move for the Rangers to bring someone in, it's fine if Jones is a part of that. But I could also see it very much being maybe they move him in the off season. We'll see.
sending out Victor Mancini in the trade for JT Miller makes it a little bit tougher for them to do that, to move Jones right now, because Mancini you would have at least felt okay about bringing up and putting in the lineup.
Yep.
That's a little less, that kind of fallback isn't there anymore. I know the Rangers still have some other good defensive prospects, but not necessarily signed right now. So I forget the name, but he's in college right now. It was rumored that the Canucks had wanted him. I know Arthur Staple had floated the name out. Can't remember the exact name. I think his last name starts with a C or something. I guess in theory, if his college season ends, he could come and you could have some additional depth available. But I think the Rangers would want to be careful, especially if Lindgren is an option potentially to be moved out there.
Drew Fortescue,
I guess his last name does
I
not start with a
think.
C. I think that's correct, Drew.
But yes, not coming right now.
No.
If you trade Jones, you kind of have maybe a little bit of a depth issue. And then the last defenseman on the list was Keandre Miller, which everything we just said about the Rangers and Jones kind of applies to Miller, but maybe more. What's the word I'm looking for? Just it's a little
Amplified.
more amplified. Yeah, it's a little more serious with Miller. He's a top four defenseman. Would be able to get you something greater in return, but now you're really opening up a hole that like I don't I wouldn't recommend doing that mid-season when you're trying to make a push for the playoffs.
Yeah. I had wondered if in my head if he could have been in like the centerpiece in the
Yeah.
JT Miller trade. Obviously that ship has sailed at this point.
Right.
But like that's probably the type of impact player that you would need to even start talking about him being in the package, and probably even a little bit more of an impact than Miller at this point. So we're talking probably clear top line forward. So I guess I wouldn't say never, but yeah, it would be a little bit more of a blockbuster type move.
It's very different. So young forward or young defenseman, decent contract right now, but is going to need a new one, but RFA. And as much as Rangers fans are upset about like every defenseman on their team, he's a solid player. It's not similar to the Ryan Lindgren situation where he's been having a really tough time and he's a pending UFA. So potentially moving Lindgren is a very different decision than Miller.
Miller's numbers when he was with Adam Fox early this season, I know people are upset eye test wise because he made some glaring mistakes, but his numbers with Adam Fox were like, oh, like that pair was elite.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I wouldn't do it if I'm the Rangers, but there's kind of Evan Bouchard syndrome with him where everyone wants to hang on to these. I mean, this
Like,
is getting a little bit not fair comparison because Bouchard's a higher ceiling player offensively and everything.
well,
But
kind of what some fans are doing as far as here's two mistakes. I'm going to forget about the 100 great, maybe, okay, not great, but the 100 good plays that he does. I'm going to focus on that one or two or three things that happened over the past week or two.
And when you have someone like Miller, who's really more of a stay-at-home type guy, not putting up the highlight reel goals, not putting up necessarily the points, those mistakes become even more
Yep.
amplified because you don't see the flash plays, you just see the very negative plays when really he probably is making 5 good plays, but they're subtle plays leading
Yes.
up to one mistake.
Yep.
Is that Well, I got to add my defenseman, Henry Jokiharju, Buffalo Sabres.
Okay.
Pending
Um.
unrestricted free agent, right shot. Again, one of the better ones available. Yeah, not much, not
Yeah.
much.
I mean, insert any team we've talked about should be on the bottom pair, but like in past years, and we already talked about Ristolainen, maybe a team gets him and he ends up being a pretty solid second or third pair guy.
I
I don't think
just,
he has the traits Ristolainen did that you
that's what I
can
was,
hang your hat on, but I guess I was just trying to end the defenseman talk on a positive note.
yeah. He's not real big, strong, and tough.
Yeah.
He's probably the exact opposite of that. So not the playoff type of build that teams seek.
Before we flip to the forwards, I want to ask a question, kind of. There is not a goalie on this list.
There is one.
There is one?
Dan Vladar.
Oh, sorry. There's not a. Well, I'm not. I'm going to be nice. Never mind. Dan Vladar, if you need a backup,
Depth. Yeah.
also hasn't been very good the past few seasons.
Depth. Break glass in case of emergency.
Yeah, so I don't know, maybe
I mean, Carolina already
I
signed
don't
Dustin
know.
Tokarski, so I
Yeah,
like that.
Vladar,
That's where
I'm
we're.
sure his name's out there. I'm guessing it's the Flames that are kind of putting his name out there of, hey, we've got a backup goalie if you need it. I don't know if that's who I'd target
No, no,
if I'm any team.
no.
All right, forwards.
One goalie I would maybe make a call on, depending on how things go in Vancouver, Kevin Lankinen.
Yeah.
Depending, but that would probably need things to go south in Vancouver and for him to be available.
Yeah, I agree.
Forwards.
Start right at the
Yeah, top, right
top.
at the top of the forward group.
Brock Nelson,
Brock Nelson.
which kind of brings up the interesting Islanders conversation of they're not out of it, they're not like really in it. What do they do? This for me is very much they're the Islanders. They could sneak into the playoffs and make a run, but they also don't have good future assets. They don't really have many prospects on the way. Trading a Brock Nelson could, I mean, a Brock Nelson trade probably gets you a first round equivalent, whether it's a pick or a prospect. That could be huge for this team.
I think there's a chance he could get more than that too.
Oh yeah. Well, I just mean that like
Yeah.
you will get a centerpiece of a first round pick or prospect. You should be getting a second piece as well.
Yep.
Pending UFA, 6 million right now. If you can get the Islanders to take half of that off, maybe even another team in to take more off. I mean, that could be great. I wonder about a team like Colorado. If you can get salary retained there, they are supposedly in the market for a 2C. Things aren't going well with Middlestat there to the point where Middlestat might even be available in a trade.
He even could be going back to the Islanders type of play, like
Maybe.
depending on what the Islanders kind of envision where things go. I mean, they would want more probably at this point, but like that would be a player that can at least come in and provide them at least keep the ship maybe somewhat afloat there.
Yeah.
I would wonder about Toronto.
Toronto would make a lot of sense as well. They would like a center.
Winnipeg.
Winnipeg,
I mean,
Minnesota.
absolutely. I
Like,
mean, yeah.
yeah. Pretty much name a contender. Do they need a center? Maybe, maybe not. Would they like one? Yes.
Yeah.
Pretty much. So it's, I think the teams we mentioned are ones that kind of clearly are in need of one. But Brock Nelson's, if available, he is the top center available. Rental, at least. Maybe Pedersen gets floated again. We'll see. But best rental available. I guess best rental / easiest contract to acquire and handle kind of pairing. Brock Nelson is probably the top target.
If not the top, very close to the top.
Yes. Really quick, because he's a pending UFA, we didn't really do this for all the defensemen, but he's more of a top guy, so I want to mention it. Currently projected a 3-year extension at about 6.725. It's really 6.73, but you're getting a clear top 6 center. His age, so July 1st is 33, so you're signing him kind of into the 36-ish range, but he's still playing really well. So I don't know. I feel like, again, I think of Colorado of you need it right now, but you also kind of need it for the future as well, or at least the near future. That's probably my favorite fit, but a lot of the other teams we mentioned could be thinking the same thing with Brock Nelson.
Let's stick with the Islanders.
Yep.
Kyle Palmieri.
Yeah.
You need goal scoring. He's going to be one of the better goal scorers available. Again, don't know what direction the Islanders are going to go. He's not going to get as much as Brock Nelson. Might get a first or like a top prospect. Might. If not, probably I could see like a second and like a B tier prospect.
He's kind of that, like, a top contender needs him, you might get a late first. Like, this is, I guess this player wasn't actually acquired for a first round pick, but like Winnipeg getting Toffoli, kind of wonder, similar type of deal. I think Toffoli was a second and a third. I might be wrong on that. It might have been a second and a fourth, but kind of that should be able to get a second round pick and another asset, maybe either similar or not quite as good of an asset. But maybe, I don't know, maybe you get a team to pay a first round pick if it's honestly like a team like Winnipeg, who should be at the top of the standings and could use some scoring.
It was a second and a third, fact
Okay.
checking it. I won so not recently Mikael Granlund and Cody Ceci were traded for a first. To me, Palmieri's better than Granlund, but it's not necessarily with CC attack. Like it's right
Yeah,
there. I wonder if Dallas. I know they got Granlund. I wonder if they could double down and look for Palmieri as well, more scoring up front. I mean,
maybe.
a lot of
Yeah.
contenders wouldn't be a bad idea, but I mean, 5 million cap hit right now. Getting it down to 2.5 is not too bad, but it's starting to get a little bit.
Winnipeg traded, so it was a 2 and a 3 for Toffoli, and it was a 1
For
and a
Monahan.
prospect maybe for Monahan. I wonder if there would be some type of deal to just get Nelson and Palmieri from the Islanders. That said, trade protection comes into play, and I will toss it out there that the Athletics' recent player poll, Winnipeg was easily the top picked
Yes.
by players on trade clauses. So
Yeah.
that could matter, but also
If
you're a pending UFA and you're going to push for a cup. I feel like you waive. I guess I don't know that for sure, but
Yeah.
I just wanted to throw it out there because it would come into play in this specific
and it would
instance.
start to warm up in Winnipeg. Like, it wouldn't be as cold when if
but there's that.
But
Players don't love it's not an easy place to get to. Like
I know.
But they should waive, I would think. It's for a few months, or, well, hopefully a little longer than that, but it's not like you're signing your life away to be in Winnipeg. It's for a push this season for a cup. But I would wonder if Winnipeg would do something like that.
Basically, a first round pick for Monahan.
Okay. So 1, 2, 3. Probably need to do a little more than that, honestly, for Nelson and Palmieri, but
And I don't remember how much salary. I don't know if a lot of salary was retained in either of those.
Monahan
deals.
might have had some.
But anyways.
But yeah. Okay.
Well, Monahan was on a very low contract to begin with.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't know. I don't think there was a ton of retained salary in there, but
if Boston's hanging around, they should try and make
Palmieri work. Yeah.
Really either of the Islanders guys. Any team needing scoring, Palmieri, Nelson.
Yep. One more Islander. J.G. Peugeot.
Kind of more of a
third
line guy. Salary still kind of up there, I believe, in the fives.
5 even. 1 year, 5 million.
So there's another year
after this.
That could make it a little tough.
Oh, yeah.
And actually, since I brought up trade clauses, that's one that could actually be a little more serious as far as the clause because there's an extra year. Might be tough to make a deal there happen.
I know someone had one of the insiders or someone of the like had floated out that he might actually garner more interest than Palmieri. I don't know why.
Well, he's a center.
He's a center with playoff experience.
That's why.
And whatever. I don't know. I would be very hesitant to give up too much for him, but
right.
Anyways, back to, I guess, some of the quote-unquote bigger names. So I'll go with a player that every playoff team is going to want to get their hands on. Brandon Tan of Seattle Kraken. $3.5 million left as a rental for this year. He is your prototypical bottom six, really bottom line.
Should be fourth line.
Playoff forward.
Yeah.
Kills penalties. Just a menace to play against.
So in recent years, you see guys like a Hathaway or Brandon Duhaime going to Washington, like those types of trades. That's what this is. It's getting that, like you said, that playoff style, heavy hitter, fourth line guy, pretty much. Now, you said 3.5 AAV. I want to toss out our projection for Tanev. Our projection has him coming down a little bit. 2 years, 2.4, 2.5. A little more in line with a bottom line guy who doesn't have the greatest numbers. He's kind of just that energy player. So that's what a team's trading for. Now, we just talked about prices for guys like Nelson and Palmieri. Reminder that even though Tanev doesn't put up points, a lot of times at a deadline, like these types of players get back a decent asset. Like, it wouldn't shock me at all if there was a second involved.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
yeah. He could even be a conditional first.
Yeah.
Team based on like how far the team goes in the playoffs.
Right.
I would love to see him and his brother in Toronto together.
Yeah. Well, so I mean that was the rumor Was it Ottawa over the offseason
Maybe
supposedly wanted to try that and didn't happen?
Ottawa would be a good idea for to acquire him.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I think most playoff contenders really should.
Right.
Brings us to a player we already alluded to.
There isn't. Do we want to kind of stick with the same team?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Let's stick with a couple more. Another Kraken.
Couple more forwards, I think.
Go to another, like, a lot of teams would like to get their hands on him for the playoffs. Yanni Gord,
Okay. Yep.
injured, going to be out for most of the remainder of the regular season. But is that really going to matter? Actually, some teams might prefer he's out for the rest of the regular
Might make
season.
things a little easier for some teams.
I could see Tampa trying to get him back.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah.
That's a really good fit. He's probably a third line center, I guess, depending on the team. Great if you slot him in as a fourth line guy. Kind of recognized as a leader, high energy guy. He's not just someone who's going to go and hit people, he's good defensively. Probably an ideal third line center. Like, there should be a lot of teams lining up trying to acquire him. In addition to him, Oliver Bjorkstrand is listed. Could be a sneaky, I'll say middle six, but I think if a team had a hole on the wing on a top line, like, he can fit there.
Yeah.
He'll play fine there. Generally good numbers from him, especially on like a not so good team. He's got 1 year after this one at 5.4 million. I That's a player I might kind of low key be like really trying to target if I'm certain teams. I don't. Maybe you get some salary retention. I don't know. Seattle might kind of say, "Well, hang on, he's a good enough player. There's another year here on his deal. We don't really want to do that." So that might limit teams that can make it happen. But that's a player I wonder. I kind of wonder if the cost ends up being similar to some rental players like a Paul Mary. I wonder if he's a little underrated. Or maybe I'm thinking perception amongst fans. He's
Yeah.
underrated and teams might kind of know and understand it's going to take a first.
Oh, I would
But
think it's going to take a first and a
it
pretty good prospect.
numbers wise it should. I just wonder if perception doesn't quite match that.
I don't think it works salary wise. I wonder if Carolina could fit him.
He's a Carolina type
Yeah,
guy.
exactly.
Yeah, I don't know if they could really make that. Dallas, if they were going to try and get
Yeah.
another forward, that could make a lot of sense. Similar to them maybe being interested in Palmieri.
Ironically, a good idea would be Columbus getting him back,
Yeah.
especially if they hang around a little bit longer.
One team that we haven't really mentioned yet. Does a team like Vegas try and do that?
Here, Palmieri could make a lot of sense for Vegas. Yes. Yeah.
Vegas could use a forward, whether it's a center or. I mean, they have centers,
They have
but
Eichel and Hurdle.
they're fine down the middle,
Yeah.
really. The only thing I'm not sure about, I I don't know how long William Karlsson's out for.
I think he'll be back this season.
Okay, if he's back during the season, it might be a little tough to make a Bjorkstrand move
Yeah.
work. I mean, maybe you can send out a defenseman, but even then, it's still kind of hard to make it work. I don't know. But that's a team that could very much use a winger like Bjorkstrand or Palmieri. But that kind of takes care of the Seattle guys, I believe. I don't think there's another forward on here.
No, I don't know if we can hit every single remaining name on Frank's board.
Right.
Another,
Just be a little quicker.
yeah, Bruins, depending on what they do. I think a lot of teams, much like we said, Tanev, a lot of teams would love to get their hands on Trent Frederick for the playoffs.
Yeah.
I mean, he could get he probably gets a first if Boston's willing to move him.
Yeah, I mean, he's also a probably ideally third line guy, center wing flexibility.
We have him, I think, like projected 4 years, like 4 million ish AAV, which would be so he's young enough where a team acquiring him could be very interested in doing an instant extension.
Yeah, so we're 4.1.
Yeah. That's a very reasonable like third line.
That's kind of your average third line center is what you should be expecting at this point.
So he's someone that I think a lot of teams would be lining up for a rental, and I think if a team could get an extension done before acquiring him, you could see that open up like anyone really.
Yes.
Like even Chicago, he would be a good idea for them for not this year, but going forward.
Oh yeah, if they can, like you said, an extension, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the type of player he pretty much makes sense for any roster. It's just obviously if you're not a contender, you really need an extension done for it to make any sense.
One more Boston player, Justin Brazeau. Apologize if I mispronounced his name there. I think it's
right.
He's analytic darling,
Yeah.
putting up points on on a minimum contract, so easy for anyone to fit.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's honestly that's the Vegas move.
That's
or any team that is
the
like
Florida Panthers move.
It's the up against the cap move.
Yeah.
So any of those teams.
Yeah.
So going and doing extension projections mid-season for a player that really has just played this season, it's not going to move much. We have him 2 by 1.5. I would expect that to shoot up a little bit, having a full season of data.
Yeah. Especially if he finishes strong.
Yep.
On a good team. Okay, let's hit a couple other names. Casey Middlestad's on the list. Kind of highlighted him already a little bit. I think it's going to be tough for Colorado to justify moving him unless they can get another player that they can insert in their lineup back.
So I mean, you're just using the Brock Nelson example. If they can acquire a center, Middlestad might have to go, depending on how the money works in the other deal, or maybe Middlestad's part of that deal. But it seems like they would like to upgrade at 2C, so they're pretty much a money in, money out team. So if they make a move, Middlestad probably goes somewhere. Now, on the flip side, he's a player who could interest really anyone.
Yes.
So maybe there are more teams lining up. I don't really know value-wise what he'd be viewed as right now.
Yeah, he might not have to go okay, we followed the Brock Nelson for Middlestad. It doesn't have to be that. There could be a secondary offer where Middlestad goes to. I'm just using Chicago as an example because they have cap space, they have assets, and he would be a decent idea for someone like them. He could go to Chicago. Well, Brock Nelson goes to Colorado, and then whatever. Like, but yes, money in, money out in essence.
Yep.
Another center I don't necessarily expect to be moved during the season, maybe more of an off season. And ironically, we just talked about Middlestat, who was in Buffalo. Dylan Cousins in Buffalo. I think it's going to be tough for them to move someone with a $7.1 million cap hit in season. It made sense if Elias Pettersson was available. That made sense to include him in that trade. I think Calgary's been a team floated out there a little bit with him. I don't know asset-wise if that matches up.
Well,
it could,
it definitely matches up. It's just, is Calgary willing to give up?
Well, yes.
What
Buffalo would desire.
Right.
And Buffalo ultimately is going to desire NHL, very close to NHL ready players as that's their end goal.
I don't think Buffalo is really in a spot where they're going to give in, because as you mentioned, 7.1 is very tough for a lot of teams to fit. So if the price they're expecting is not met, why do it now?
Yeah.
It's probably an off-season thing because more teams would be involved.
Yeah.
Unless they have, like, this is our price, and say Calgary says, okay, we'll do it.
Yeah.
Then you do it. But
yeah. But they can't end up making picks at 5 and like 13 again this season. Like they can't justify doing that with where they are.
I mean, they could.
It's
actually, like, if take a step back and take emotion out of it, it's very justifiable.
Well, yes, but when you're 14 years out of the playoffs and have rebuilt like 3 times in there, it's not going to go over well with the fans if they do that.
It's also been 13 years of not going over well with the fans.
What's
one
more? What's one more? Let's see. A couple other players to highlight forward wise.
And we can run through quickly here. Armia from Montreal.
Fourth line type.
Third?
Yeah, I should have said
third line.
Bottom 6.
Good player, both ends of the ice. Jack Quinn, actually, for the Sabres. Probably similar type of mindset as Cousins, although the contract is not big. It's still his rookie contract, so it'd be a lot easier for teams to fit. But that also might just be one that they don't really pull the trigger on now.
I think that's just one you maybe let him get another offseason of training and see, like, do a 1-2 year contract this offseason, see what he can come with another summer of hopefully being healthy and being able to train full summer, fresh, basically clean slate, fresh mindset. And I think you just roll him back out next year. I
would say it's very possible he gets moved in the offseason.
It is.
But right now at the deadline, there's no real, I don't know. I don't know what you're getting back that makes it worth doing it right now.
Exactly. I mean, the same is going to be said for Cousins and a lot of Sabre players, but you're selling at the lowest value about now. So
that said, if you let it ride to the off season, it's very possible the value continues to drop.
Oh yeah.
So is what it is. Ryan Donato.
That's a
good bottom 6 guy
Yeah.
to have, really. I guess in a pinch he could move up, but you're ideally acquiring him for 3rd or 4th line, and you'll get a solid player.
Good power play player as well.
Yeah.
And not that usually if you're one of the top teams, you probably already have a decent power play, but good net front kind of guy on the power play, which is a little bit of a unique skill set. So
yeah,
I think contenders should be lining up for him, especially given with some money retained, he can go down to 1. Worst case, you get him at 2.
Yep. Jake Evans, 3rd, 4th line center.
Yep.
Good defensively from Montreal.
Yeah, a lot of teams should be lining up for him.
A lot of teams should be. Probably you lose out on Gord. Evans is a great.
Or don't have the cap space for Gord. Evans.
Or need the player during the season.
Yeah.
That too. So maybe that wasn't the greatest.
Another Montreal player who's probably on this trade board perpetually, Josh Anderson. Whatever. I don't want to dismiss him, but I think we've talked.
I think he's there because Montreal would like to move him.
Correct.
But in the notes here under him being listed, his massive frame is appealing to so many front offices, which kind of sounds like that is like what Montreal would like everyone to believe.
Correct.
But sure, that is true. But I don't know if teams are really taking on the player at $5.5 million for 2 more seasons after this one. So I don't know. I guess never say never. But
Gustav Nyquist, good veteran player, should get second, third round pick for Nashville, probably middle six.
Yeah, maybe a second. He's kind of fallen off this year. But
yeah, but
maybe.
so is a lot of players in Nashville. So
Nick Robertson's listed for Toronto. That feels like more of a if he's part of bringing someone back.
Yeah.
So if they can go out and get Nelson, he's probably part of the deal.
Yeah. Or like even Brandon Tanev, you can send him to Seattle. Like,
yeah.
Or even just if you have someone coming in and you need a roster spot, he could be going out. It again doesn't have to be in the same move.
And that I think pretty much leaves us with Pettersson,
who I believe might be an off-season move at this point,
unless things continue to be very
toxic,
filled with turmoil in Vancouver. I would assume that's an off-season thing, but I guess you never know.
You don't. But again, you don't have a lot of teams that are going to be able to line up.
Right.
11.6
you wait till the off season, all of a sudden. I mentioned Minnesota. That's a team where we know cap space is a little tough right now, but looking at next season, it'll be a little easier.
Yeah, when you talked about dangling Jiricek, like Pettersson was like the first name that came to my mind. Like, okay, if we're gonna...
Well, I didn't specifically
yes.
say it, but Pettersson, Cousins, like some of the bigger named centers with term, that could make sense, but that's not really something happening now.
One important thing to point out with Pettersson before we wrap up the episode, no trade clause kicks in July 1.
Yes.
Very, very possible he's a draft. He's traded around the draft.
Yeah. Yep.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah. So if they're going to move him, it's not happening after or at July 1st. It's
happening in the month of June, probably. Yeah. Yep. So we appreciate you listening. Max Stern Podcast, available on pretty much all major podcast platforms. Contract projections that we've referenced a few times are pinned on X and Blue Sky at AFP Analytics. And we'll talk to you next time.